In the midst of increasing insurance denials, changing regulatory requirements, and patient expectations in 2025, independent healthcare practice leaders have a lot to manage. Within this context, employer branding might seem like something only bigger practices need to worry about. Alas, professional burnout, rising resignations, and stress in the healthcare field is making it harder to find and keep great employees for practices of all sizes. Being deliberate, transparent, and consistent about how your practice cares for its employees might be the biggest advantage you have in caring for your patients in a challenging environment. If your healthcare practice struggles with staffing, take a listen to today's show. We're talking with Kara Escobedo, HR Director at Celebration Speech Group, whose specialty is building and delivering on a trusted employer brand experience. Today, she'll share insights on what that means and why it's not only a good practice, but good business. And more importantly, Kara will explain a few tips on what you can do to diagnose and treat a lackluster employer brand at your office. All right, so welcome, Kara.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we dig in, please share why you do what you do. What brought you to HR and also specifically to Celebration Speech Group?
So I think like most HR professionals, it's one of those that kind of fell in my lap. And I don't know if there's that many aspiring students or young adults like, I can't wait to be in HR. So it is something that crossed my path, and it was definitely a blessing for me. I was already in healthcare, and once I started the kind of my HR career in healthcare, it just felt so natural to me. It was very
Yeah.
clear that this is where I belong. And when I came to Celebration Speech Group, it was, like most people looking for a different, job opportunity to kind of what's the next step in my career. And even before we were this big, because we were so much, Tebra knows, we were so much smaller back then when I had joined the company. And I could already kind of see the vision with our practice owner. I could see where they were headed. Mind you, then there was no like online presence really at all. And being in HR, it was really important for me to do my homework on where I'm going to be employed. And I did take a leap of faith, but I felt so confident and positive, and just that gut feeling of, nope, this is the chance that I want to take. And I couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic. So I imagine many small healthcare practices don't have their own in-house HR. Can you share the reason the founder brought you in and the size of the practice at that point?
So we had, gosh, maybe 20 employees then. And HR is often outsourced in a small company. It just financially tends to be the most cost effective, and there usually isn't enough administrative employees to cover all those areas. So when she brought me in, it was a time where she could see the future of the practice, and she could see this pivotal turning point of, okay, we're going from here. Now we're going to go to here, and I need more support. I need to bring our HR in and have more, it's also kind of control over that department. And I say that in actually a very positive way, is that you want to be connected with HR. And it's really hard to be connected with an outsourced company. It's, don't get me wrong, that is a great resource and tool when needed, but it was just really a big turning point for the company. And it was a time to bring HR inside so we could work collaboratively together to take that next step in the business.
That's really great insight, and kind of taking it a little step further. How often are you collaborating with the practice owner and really kind of curating that strategy together?
Well, we connect every day. It's, we're in the position that I'm in. When you work directly with a business owner, it's important to stay connected. Working strategically together, that's a weekly conversation, weekly meetings. Everything that we talk and meet about always ties back to the strategy on growing the business and strengthening it. I think it's not really top of mind for a lot of people to think that every conversation, every meeting, some people, it's a common, I'm sure many of you can relate that it's a common feeling that some meetings are a waste of time, or this could have been an email. I've seen those like memes on social media. But I know just as much as she does that it always comes back to the vision of the practice. So it's
Mhm.
regular basis we're strategizing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, one thing we wanted to touch on is costs. So, we'd really like to kind of unpack this topic a little bit. What is an employer brand and how does it impact a good employee experience?
Employer brand is actually a phrase that I'm learning a lot of companies don't understand, or they've just completely never heard of it. And that's quite surprising to me because it makes me wonder, what is their vision? How are they
Hmm.
creating that great employee experience? Because it's all tied and connected. But when people do first hear of employer brand, they associate it with marketing and social
Yeah.
media. And surface level, that is pretty accurate, but it is so much deeper than that. It's your employer brand is the story that your employees are going to tell to others. And that, of course, carries right over into patients and clients. So if you know that your employees are the ones projecting and showing your employer brand, that is your marketing. You don't need to hire paid actors and all these fancy things because your employees are the ones doing it for you. So it's a recruitment tool. It's all sorts of things. Under I think of it an employer brand is kind of like an umbrella. And that starts within the organization.
Really great insight. So when you think about building your employer brand and you've really kind of mentioned this is not only just what your employees experience, it's what your patients experience. How long of an investment has it been for you to build your brand?
From day one, it's been
Yeah.
the investment. It's something that you're constantly working on. I'm not sure if that answers your question directly, but it's not just a period of time. It's something
Mhm.
that's continuous. Almost everything we do, especially in HR, comes back to building and maintaining that employer brand. It's so much bigger than just like, okay, we built it, we're done, let's move on. It's a continuous maintenance, and all of us play a part in that. Actually, each employee plays a part in that. It's not just me, it's not just the HR department or the owner. It's all of us collectively. And a lot of employees don't know that or see that. And that's okay. It's not their job to know like, oh, I'm wearing this hat, I have to fulfill something. It's no, they inadvertently are playing that part.
Yeah. No, that's really great insight. Thank you. I would love to know if you're able to share any statistics on the average time it takes to hire and onboard a new healthcare employee for an independent practice.
I wish there was a one size fits all benchmark, a statistic. And on average, and we say average, right? We're taking so many different types of industries in healthcare or specialties. The average is roughly 49, 52 days, somewhere around there. So we could say about 50 days is around the average. One of the biggest things that kind of can move that needle a little bit is the position that you're hiring for and the
Mm.
location of where you're hiring. When you factor those two things in, 50 days could be way overestimating, or it could be some people would be like, oh my gosh, it took me twice as much as that. So, really, just those two factors are huge. But I would say around 50 days is a fair average.
Oh, wow. So taking that into consideration, 50 days to hire, what's the average length of time that providers stay before they leave?
Similar circumstance where you have to take a lot of factors into consideration, the more advanced the role is, meaning if they have a specialty credential. If we're talking doctors or any type of licensed medical professional, they typically are going to stay a lot longer. It's important for them to settle in somewhere. And so on the short end, 3 years. I would say average is about 6. Non specialty credentialed healthcare providers or employees, they are, I would say 3 years now is pretty average. It's not like how it used to be where you find a job. I know I think of like my mom, for example, who is well beyond
Hmm.
retirement now. And it's like you get the job and you stay there for life. You
Yeah.
don't talk about getting a new job. They don't even have resumes. But as generations kind of change and unfold, 3 years is often pretty average.
Oh, well, that's great insight. And typically, how are you staying cognizant or tracking turnover rates at your business? Are there benchmarks that you try to keep an eye on when understanding how the employee experience is going?
Absolutely. It's something that we pay close attention to. And we usually also know in when we're just talking speech therapy for this part of the conversation that it's important that we identify certain times of years, maybe where someone's at in their career. All those can also tell us outside of just the employee experience when they could be considering other employment options. And a part of our employer brand is recognizing, hey, this person, this was their first speech therapy position. They're probably going to be interested in exploring other options for their career within the next couple of years. What can we do to retain them? What other opportunities do we have so they can grow personally and professionally, but still stay with us? So that is always our goal in mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's make it even more real. Can you share a story that you've seen in your years as an HR leader where a poor employee experience was not only harming the patient experience, but literally killing the business?
Yes, I definitely can share. So we have multiple locations, right? We have our headquarters office and satellite locations. And it's important that at our satellite offices that employees are really connected to the source, meaning like us here in headquarters. And we had one satellite location that it was pretty clear something was going on because we started to see some resignations that we weren't anticipating. And then there was another one and another one. And before you know it, that wildfire just did not stop. And the entire office was wiped out, from admin to healthcare professionals. I'm talking ground zero. And yeah, my expression too. So it was, I'm kind of laughing at it now, but at the time it was extremely devastating and it was scary. It was like wake up call, right? That was the pivotal turning point of, okay, this is even worse than we thought. And we were able to directly connect it to the main supervisor for that location. And it's when you're looking at turnover and the reasons behind it, there's typically like a symptom, like, right, the resignations are the symptom. What's the root cause? It's not even about pointing fingers or blaming or, oh man, that supervisor was terrible. Had nothing to do with that. It was the disconnect between that supervisor and our management as a whole, our leaders of the company. Instead of supporting and encouraging these employees, the supervisors so disconnected themselves that they were supporting the negativity. They were reassuring them that their negative thoughts are real and true. And the only solution is we all better get out. And so that is the polar opposite of what we want in management or in a company. And so we had to really sit back and, I mean, again, we're at ground zero with this office. So it was like, we might as well just start over. And how do we prevent this from happening again? And that's hard to take a look in the mirror and be like, we did this, right? Like we failed in some capacity. We can only grow and learn from it. And so we rebuilt and won't make similar mistakes in the future, right?
Yeah, no, that must have been incredibly jarring to have to start over from scratch. How long did it take for you to rebuild that office from that point?
Uh, I would say anywhere between 6 to 10 months.
I'm sure that was quite the process and a ton of work to get there as well.
It definitely is, but all businesses, whether in healthcare or not, go through trying times. And I believe that we are fortunate that we were able to recover from something like that. Not a lot of businesses do. Oftentimes they close their doors. We only hear about the thriving businesses, but statistically speaking, your average small business, especially starting, over 50% don't make it. So the fact that we were able to not only make it, grow, and hit roadblocks like that and regrow from it, that's impressive.
It definitely shows true grit and resilience, that's for sure. And rather than getting stuck in the reasons why that location could have been at fault for the incident or the resignations, really kind of taking ownership of that and driving it towards a positive outcome is truly impressive.
Yes. Well, none of us would be where we are now if we did like cast blame. And that's not what leadership is. We don't just point fingers and, blame people for problems. It's like you said, it takes grit. We have to stick with it. But we're a very humble women led team. So we're proud of how we lead.
And you should be. I will say when we came to visit your location and spoke with all of your employees, you could tell that there was true passion in the purpose of each employee, as well as the purpose and the mission of Celebration Speech Group. So it's just wonderful to see that it really has cascaded from every leadership role into every single contributor to that mission.
And to talk about humbling, hearing, I mean, even in live time during that recording day, hearing some of my staff talk about their experience here, why they're here, and we're like teary eyed. And it was just, it was such a meaningful moment. And although I know my team, like I know them, better than anyone, but sometimes we lose sight of that. We forget
Yeah.
why we hired them. We forget sometimes the meaningful parts of their interviews like that. And so to kind of come back to day one of, yes, this is why I wanted you on our team. It was just a really humbling reminder. So I'm so grateful for the day that you guys were here.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. We just had so much fun hearing your story, the entire team story, learning about all of the impacts that you make on patients. Like it's just really wonderful to be able to connect what we do on a daily basis to a true positive outcome for a patient. It makes it all worth it. It makes us so happy to be doing what we're doing.
I love that. So it wasn't just the lunch. It was
I mean, the lunch was a plus. But the definite best part was hearing from all of you and just seeing the impact that you've made on your employees is just incredible.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So thinking about, talking to the audience, what can listeners do about their employee brand?
It's, it's common for employers to get really caught up in the day to day, and we're moving fast and we're not taking the time to slow down and to look at those warning signs. It's something that's always there. The warning signs, 1,000% of the time, it is not true to think, I didn't know. No, you knew or you could have known, but you didn't slow down to see. And sometimes that has to do with capacity, right? If you're wearing too many hats. I mean, there's days that I'm not just like HR, I'm business operations, I'm finance, I'm legal to a degree. The other day, I'm like working on ceiling leaks. Like there's, facility maintenance. Like there's so many hats that we all wear, especially in a small business and in healthcare. And that's okay, but we have to recognize it can't be okay every day, because then you miss those warning signs of an unhappy employee. And that can look like many different things. And so I think my best advice for others is to just slow down and look, spend time with your employees, listen to what's going on. Stay interviews and exit interviews are some of my favorite resources and tools. I think that they are grossly underrated. I think people think that it's a waste of their time. And that's not true. It is not a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time if you don't do anything with the information. But getting that feedback is incredibly important. And I think lastly is the first, I would say 60 to 90 days of having a new employee on board is a critical time. I'm trying to think of an example of outside of employment, like a crucial period. Think of like maybe if you have like a warranty on something and it's like you got 30 days to figure out if you like this or not. Or you buy a new dress and you're like, I got to return it in 2 weeks if I don't like it. And so it's that like anywhere between like 30 and 90 days is so critical. And we tend to miss out on opportunities to identify either positive experiences or negative experiences. So honing in on that, because if you have an employee that leaves under 1 year or maybe just over, you lost them in those first 90 days. No one just randomly decides at year one, I think I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. No, you lost them months ago and you missed months and months and months of warning signs that you could have turned things around.
Really great insight. So you know, mentioning the warning signs to look out for, I'd love to go through a few of the most common pitfalls of an unhealthy employer brand. So I'd love to talk with you about how healthcare leaders can look for signs that their employees' experience might be at risk and what they can do about that.
Yeah, of course. And I will say it tends to look the same everywhere. Obviously, my experience is mostly in healthcare, but it tends to be the same with every business. And it doesn't matter if you have 5 employees or 500 employees. The first warning sign is emotional disconnection. Your employee is emotionally disengaged. And it's funny because so many professionals or like CEOs really, I mean, talking like big companies are like, well, you don't bring feelings into the workplace. And no, we do. If you are not emotionally connected to your job, why are you there? You're not going to do a good job because emotions are who we are as humans. And if you have the ability to shut off your emotions, please come talk to me. I would love to hear more about superpower that you have.
Yeah, same. I would love to know too how you could do that.
So it's emotional disconnection, which really looks like disengagement. That's the first thing, is being really disengaged. And for example, I think I was sharing, I think offline earlier, about our Halloween costume, like kind of competition that we do here. And I tend to look for those who maybe aren't interested, kind of taking a back seat. And unless there's another reason that they don't want to participate, sometimes that is a sign that it's emotional disconnection, that they're, what's the point? Or, they're not really having a good time or enjoying. Or maybe you're having like a lunch, a company get together, and someone either doesn't attend or like, I'm going to grab my pizza and go sit at my desk. Why? Most people are looking for a reason to socialize in the workplace. So why are you not engaged? So that's definitely the first sign.
That's a great point and something that you can really kind of be aware of from the beginning. So what should an owner do when they start to see that type of sign? How can they address it?
That's the time to get curious, not to punish, not to give this like negative feedback. And that is a step in the process that I would say most people go wrong, because immediately turns into, your coworkers say that you're not very engaged, or we would really like you to be more collaborative. And it just feels like punishment. Even if you're not writing them up, it feels like shame, which reinforces whatever's going on, reinforces that negative experience. So it's when you start asking more probing questions, like I said, the state interviews. And state interviews shouldn't really be random anonymous surveys. Employees hate that. They don't want some anonymous survey because you know what? It's not really anonymous. We can always figure out who it is. And so it's just, they want that face-to-face interaction with someone who's probably not their manager or supervisor. And so getting curious and asking, how is your day-to-day going? How can we make your day-to-day easier? Are you feeling challenged? Are you feeling too challenged? And it is okay to ask, like, hey, I noticed you didn't participate in this event that we did, I hope you weren't feeling uncomfortable. Is there, something that I can do to meet your needs, to meet you halfway? Because you're such a valuable part of our team. So it's kind of what the conversation starts to look like. And it has to be pretty much right away. If you don't address it right away, again, every day you ignore it or accept it for what it is, you're reinforcing their negative thoughts.
That's a really great point, and a good reason to really hop in. And I love that perspective of approaching it with curiosity more than anything. I'm sure that, that also helps the employee feel like you care. So it's less about what they're doing and more trying to understand how the company can support.
It is, because if the employee doesn't feel that anyone cares, what happens as these kind of warning signs unfold is they now believe that their voice doesn't matter. And once someone gets to that point, for one, you really can hardly ever turn it around. And for two, they don't speak up. And so typically, as the warnings unfold, lack of communication or disconnecting communication is the next kind of symptom. And once that happens, people think that, well, they're just doing their job, right? They're not speaking up because everything's fine. And it's kind of like your really quiet toddler in the next room that you want to naively believe they're just sitting there watching TV like the sweet angel that they are. And silence does not equate to anything good in the workplace. It means that they believe their voice doesn't matter. Why speak up if nobody's going to listen to me? And they go about their merry way when they're probably spending 40% of their time using your internet and computer to look for a new job. So it's not, you're creating, by ignoring all these things, you're creating a really costly, risky situation that you could have turned around with just a 20-minute conversation.
It's great insight. Thank you. So what's another warning sign that practices can look out for in regards to employee sentiment?
So I like to look at it as almost like a 3-step process. We have emotional disconnection, we have communication breakdowns, and then the final symptom is that employee turnover. So resignations or they kind of go hand in hand, poor client or patient feedback. So if you do like patient surveys, or you have like a client care department where people can call in if they're experiencing frustrations, that's all going to increase. Because if our employees are not happy at work and not feeling heard and valued, it directly carries over into the clients, into the patients. It is pretty common that in healthcare, if a provider is unhappy and they're leaving, some of their patients are going to follow them, or they're just going to leave in general, because they can tell, man, my provider, Susie, she's, I can tell she's not happy at work. She was frustrated that she didn't get a pay increase, or whatever it may be. And so why are they going to keep coming to the practice when they can tell that the employees aren't happy here? So it's like a puzzle. They fit together. And if one isn't happy, the other isn't happy. So yeah, unfortunately, that rising turnover and those patient complaints, that is the final symptom.
What should a practice owner do if they start to see that telltale sign of a poor employee experience? How can they address it if it's at the point of turnover?
Well, they should have listened to warning 1, right? Now, I know it happens to the best of us. Unfortunately, we can't go backwards. But once you get to this point, you have to just deal with the situation that you're in. Begging an employee to stay is a common thing that employers try, because they know that either they messed up and they want to fix it. They know how costly and, like we talked about, timely it's going to be to get someone in to replace them. So it's like, what can we do to keep you here? And sometimes that works, but ultimately, that's not always something that I recommend. And so at that point, you have to look at, what did I miss? What warning signs specifically were there that I either chose not to look at or completely just was oblivious to? And that happens during an exit interview. Exit interviews are also commonly not conducted, or they're conducted really poorly. I've worked with other businesses on exit interviews and how to make them the most meaningful, how to get the most out of it. And so you can't work on your employer brand in a sufficient way if you're not identifying why people are leaving your company. And so it's important to really look at that process and not skip over it. And then once you collect that data, do something about it, which is the first part is talking to your leadership team of like, here's what we gathered. Did we know this? What are, there's obviously lots of perspectives and things to consider, but yeah, the exit interviews is my top recommendation because all you can do is try to fix it for next time.
It's really great insight and being able to think about the learnings that you take from that for sure. I would love to dive a little bit further into the warning sign in between with regards to the communications breakdown. What does that look like when you're experiencing a communications breakdown warning sign?
Those are the quiet employees. Those are the ones that aren't speaking up. Often something really small gets blown into something huge. It could be as simple as, I think of a good example, that they didn't speak up about maybe something in their schedule. And it was something super small, like you forgot my time off request. And a happy employee would be like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Like, let me help you move these patients around or whatever it may be. I am off tomorrow because it's my birthday or whatnot. And an unhappy employee is like, they did it again. They made another mistake. They don't care about my time off. Nobody remembered my birthday. And it's unfortunate because the employer probably did just make an unfortunate mistake. It wasn't personal by any means. And it's also hard to keep track of birthdays. So it's things like that it's something that is actually really small, but it feels really big to an unhappy employee.
It's really great insight. What should a practice owner do when they start to see that telltale sign with an employee?
Yeah. So depending on the level of supervisors and managers, right? So typically it's like you have employees and there's a supervisor, a manager, and then directors or owners in HR. It's important for those kind of more towards the top, so to say, to look at how their supervisors and managers are effectively communicating with employees. So again, the supervisors are going to think, Susie never speaks up. I don't have to deal with her. She's awesome. She gets here on time. She goes home when she's supposed to. Don't need to worry about her. And that right there is, kind of the problem, right? And so the managers and those up above, including HR, need to make sure that people are leading effectively. And a part of that is communication, checking in with employees. I am always amazed at how many employers don't regularly check in with their staff. And I've experienced this myself, even being in HR and not being connected to the business owner. It's like, I think it was like, once a month or something we connected. And it's just, that's not normal. That's not common. It should be frequently that you're checking in. And it doesn't matter if you're a director, an owner, a frontline employee, whichever your position is, you should have some type of relationship with your managers and supervisors to regularly check in and have goals that you're talking about, not just, how's your week going? You're doing great. Awesome. Get back to work. No, you need to have metrics that you're following to make sure that all that is, effective.
That's really great insight. Thank you so much for diving into that. So thinking about the silver linings of a healthy employer brand, the benefits that a practice can gain by creating a healthy employer brand. What are a few additional advantages to smart and consistent engagement on your employer brand experience?
There's so many silver linings. It's your employer brand is really just what makes you whole. And I would say, I think for like recruitment purposes, you're attracting usually the right people. It can be hit or miss, but it puts you at a higher advantage to attract not just the next person, but the right person. So knowing that because in healthcare, people do their homework. They don't just go find the next job that's going to pay them what looks nice. It's actually usually a red flag to me in an interview if they don't know anything about us. And if they comment on, yeah, I read your reviews and your patients are happy, your employees are happy, or I saw this on your website, those kind of like green lights are going off for me of, okay, they are serious about their next position versus the others who are like, can you remind me what company you are? And I'm just like, oh man, it's also on my Zoom background, but it's, those are the things that I'm like, yeah, you know, you're not going to be connected to our employer brand. So I think recruitment, it's essentially almost, I use the word free a little loosely, but it's almost like free marketing. Nothing is free, as we know, but
It's
so I
very
think
true.
that's good. That's the number one. And then you're building trust between your patients and or clients and your employees. It just kind of, it's almost like the glue that keeps things together. And so building trust is really important. I think a really good employer brand does that, not just internally with your existing staff, but those coming to you to apply for positions. It's you're giving them a reason to trust you.
And I will admit that is one of the things that we noticed when in speaking with one of your employees. It was your employer brand that made them want to apply and aspire to work at Celebration Speech Group. So it's obviously working, and it is helping with your recruitment of top tier providers and practitioners, which is really exceptional.
It is. So recruitment is a big part, and then strengthening that engagement within our existing staff, that helps immensely. To name a couple others, our reputation in the community with patients, that's a huge part of it. It takes both sides. It takes the employees and it takes the patients to run the business. Our employer brand has to speak to the heart of all of them. Because if I'm only connecting our employer brand to employees, I'm not reaching those patients. If we're only reaching the patients, I'm not reaching the employees. So that's a big part of it. And then I think that brings me to our competitive edge. In theory, puts us ahead of other businesses that are hiring paid actors, right? Or they are just putting on some fancy show that isn't actually them. I don't know if you've ever been somewhere where you saw maybe what the restaurant or something looks like online, and you go there and you're like, this is not what, or your spaghetti online did not look like this. So it's important to show to the community what is real and raw. Because then when they come here, it's exactly what, I mean, we have balloons that say like Celebration Speech Group on them. And like, you'll see that on our social media pages, but also when you come in, you know, it's maybe the kid's birthday and they're going to get all those things too. So it literally looks inside exactly what we show to the outside.
Yes, no, that is a really great point, and so important for people to feel like the experience matches the expectations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kara. It's just been so wonderful to chat with you and to really learn more about Celebration Speech Group as well as your role with really delivering an exceptional employer brand. So to wrap this up and to summarize what we chatted about today, a lacking or inconsistent employee experience doesn't have to put your practice into peril. Here's a recap of what we learned today with Kara to help you deliver on a rewarding and connected experience for your team. The biggest mistake leaders make is waiting for a crisis to start paying attention to culture. The signs are always there. You just have to slow down enough to see them. The more you invest in showing who you are, the less you have to sell who you are. For more information or to connect with Kara, please see the show notes below. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated your time, your insights, and just your overall expertise. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you for having me.